this is what he said, Mr. Speaker, in the extract. Mr. Speaker, before I close, permit me only to acknowledge the tremendous efforts made by all of my colleagues in the cabinet and their respective staff who exerted tremendous efforts in preparing their respective budgets, submissions, and yes, I think a round of applause is eminently deserving. Permit me also to acknowledge the contributions and submissions made by so many stakeholders throughout the length and breadth of Guyana, some of whom submitted written submissions and some of whom participated in face-to-face or virtual engagements, sharing ideas, making suggestions, and discussing issues. Finally, I trust that I would be forgiven for saving the last word for my own team at the Ministry of Finance, who over the past few weeks made it eminently evident to me why on my return to the ministry, I really did feel like I was returning home. I thank them for the energy that they exerted in preparing this budget. It was not easy, as you can imagine. They invested tremendous long hours, and I trust that all the members of this House would agree that they did a phenomenal job. With those not so few words, the privilege is mine on this People's Progressive Party civic government's behalf to propose this budget 2021 for consideration and approval by this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, I totally endorse what Dr. Ashley Singh said. But I said I will quote this because some people had heard, or the ears heard, because I've heard it more than once that Dr. Singh did not acknowledge what did not acknowledge the effort that went into preparation of this budget by members of his staff. Sir, in making a presentation, there are sometimes written notes, and then in a debate, there are things that you add as you go along. Many members in this House say, if you, Mr. Speaker, if you take a look at what we prepare, and then you go to the record, you will see addition to what was said. What is of critical importance is what is said here. And Mr. Speaker, what Dr. Singh said here came from the heart, sir. It's how he was feeling. What is in this budget, sir, is where the calculated mind, the analytical mind, where they would be studying projections, they'll be studying trends, studying numbers, looking at our manifesto, what developmental path we'll want to take, and put it into this document. This extract demonstrates clearly how Dr. Singh felt about members of his staff giving him the support. And so I think that it was of value that we recognize and we emphasize that Dr. Singh did not in any way forgot the efforts that went into the preparation of this budget by his staff. Mr. Speaker, on the 9th of February, His Excellency, the President, sir, gave the keynote address to a consultation that was hosted by the Global Water Partnership Caribbean and the high-level expert and leaders panel on water and disaster and Global Water Partnership. This consultation was on water and health. And in delivering that keynote address, the President said clearly that in order for us to address issues of water and health and disaster, we must build a solid foundation. We must build a solid foundation. And then, sir, on the 11th of February, right here in this dome, where nothing was lost, His Excellency went on to talk about the oneness of our Guyanese people and his vision for our development. And I think, sir, what he spoke about is aptly captured in the budget presentation made by Dr. Singh. Because here you have the laying of foundation with the vision of oneness and the good life for all, outlined in all its pages. I think there's 77 of them, if I'm correct. 77 of these pages. So, Mr. Speaker, as we debate this budget, all of us will acknowledge that the 383, just over $383 billion that we're going to spend here in 2021 will go a long way towards fixing that foundation that the president spoke about. And no amount of distractions will take us away from that. Whether it's in Region 10, I see the comrade has left, the honorable member has left, and to say that electricity, sir, I was quite frankly surprised that the honorable member from Region 10 out of Linden would talk about electricity. They're getting it almost free there. And I think that we as a government should try to bring down the cost of electricity for all our citizens, make it comparable. Instead of raising the rates there, what we will do here, and the budget addresses it, with investment in renewable, in investment in the Wales Development Authority, bringing the gas line to shore, is to bring the cost of electricity down. A solid foundation on which our economy could take off. So we will fix that. The house lots that he's clamoring about, I'm certain colleagues here, Susan Rodriguez and the Honorable Colin Kroll, we in our manifesto spoke about 50,000 house lots. So we lag a little bit last year, but under understandable circumstances, we're going to pick up steam and we're going to get rolling. And by the end of the 5 terms, sir, I'm certain we will deliver on that manifesto promise of 50,000 house lots. Sir, again, I mean, what can be more solid than concrete? The honorable gentleman who spoke before me spoke about the establishment of a concrete factory in Region 10. And then went on to say it's abstract. So I simply cannot understand the logics of making that commitment and then say that it is abstract. Mr. Speaker, in the days preceding, we would have listened to some contribution. And I recall this morning, Mr. Ramjatan spoke passionately about this issue of loans and repayments and taxes and all of that. And so we need to be reminded that loans were very much a part of our life. Indeed, the loans that were taken by the PNC between that period 64 to 92 was like a stone around our necks. And by 92, debt repayment represents 152% of revenues. That is what it was. And I mentioned that, sir, to fast forward to 2015, when with that big loan around our neck, we, the People's Progressive Party Civic Administration, was able to reduce that to just 5% of revenues. Because debt in itself is not evil, it's not bad. It's how you manage it. And Mr. Ramjatan, sir, seasoned politician as he was, seems to think that taking debt or raising debt ceiling is a bad thing. Yet on the other hand, they're clamoring for credit to our Guyanese people. If debt is a bad thing, why is it that you're clamoring so much for access to loans and so to our people? The government itself should also have access to loans. And that is why, sir, in order for us to grow as a country, what we have done is to establish credit worthiness. Not everybody could borrow, Mr. Speaker. You can only borrow if you're qualified to borrow, if you're credit worthy, if you can pay back. And simply based on our records, sir, people are falling over themselves to lend money to us. And that is why this administration can borrow. And that is why, sir, we had absolutely no difficulty in raising the debt ceiling for both external and domestic loans. Because we are confident, sir, that we can pay. Mr. Ramjatan spoke about not borrowing. So they did not borrow. What they did, the honorable member Ramjatan, sir, he said that they did not borrow. What they did, sir, is that they bullied. They bullied the Bank of Guyana to cash checks rather than do the decent thing and borrow. And that is why we, as a responsible government, we had to go and raise the debt ceiling at two levels, sir, at the local level and at the external level. We had to raise the ceiling to regularize the wickedness that was done by the APNU AFC. The taxes that he spoke about, Mr. Speaker, that, when we said that we managing a huge budget with no new taxes, and Ramjatan spoke about taxes. What we have to talk about, sir, is that between the period 2015 to 2019, the APNU government, sir, raking an additional $83 billion more, $83 billion more in taxes in that period from what it was. And that, sir, takes you exactly to what they were talking about, Mr. Ramjatan, the honorable member. Mr. Speaker, I recall a saying by author and poet Robert Louis Stevenson. I recall reading this novel in school, Treasure Island. He's the author of that. And Robert Louis Stevenson said, Mr. Speaker, that don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant. So the APNU from 2015 to when they were forced to vacate were only concerned about harvesting. They were only concerned about harvesting. They were not planting anything. They were not planning for anything. And that is why I have serious difficulties with the colleagues over on that side talking about the just over 40% growth in our economy in 2020, which Dr. Singh acknowledged. But they failed to go on to say, that the non-oil economy retracted by 7.3%. And that is what is crucial, Mr. Speaker. Because if you want to avoid the resource course, if you want to avoid the Dutch disease, this is exactly what you have to avoid. You cannot.
Honorable member, if you want to avoid cutting off at this time, you have to get an extension.
Pardon me, sir?
Mr. Speaker, with your permission,
Oh, Lord.
5 minutes.
Thank you very much,
Requested.
Honorable Prime Minister. Honorable member, you may proceed with 5 minutes additional time to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, is that an Apple timekeeper you have there?
No, it's a Nadia timekeeper.
Sir, I'll have to ask, Mr. Figueroa, honorable member, is not here because, Mr. Speaker, when you start out on these things, you get caught up with time, and like the honorable member can't even finish that pig pen up to now. So, but Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I want to address another issue. Mr. Ramjatan on this on agriculture. Honorable Mr. Ramjatan, on the issue of agriculture, sir, he glorified what the PNC, AP, and UAFC did with rice. But let me tell you the true story, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Mr. Ramjatan talked about this growth. And so, when I look at the production, in 2010, production was 556,193 tons. In the 5-year period from 2010 to 2015, it moved to 1,058,129 tons. Almost double so. What happened under the PNC now from 2015 to 2020 is that from 1,058,129 tons in 2015 to 2020, production was 1,057,580 tons. Actually, it represents a decrease of 549 tons from the 2015 figure. Mr. Speaker, what Mr. Ramjatan, honorable member, was talking about was comparing one year to the other. What I'm comparing is what they came in and reached, and at the end of 5 years, instead of building on it, they actually produce less. And this is replicated, sir, in all other administrative areas, and especially in the productive sector. And it's really unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that the time seemed to have just run out like that, because I want to talk about more about the development of the agriculture sector. What was done to Gaisuko, sir? Sugar. Sugar is the reason why most of us we're here today. Most of us are here today. Sir, and the Honorable Minister of Agriculture spoke about the sugar levy. When sugar was King Sugar, sugar was looking after the welfare of this country. And it is only reasonable that now that sugar is in some problem, that the country repay its debt to the sugar sector and to allow our people a breathing space. And by their own COI, as the minister said, sir, sugar does have a future. And Mr. Speaker, I would join with my colleague, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, and call on the Chief Whip, the Honorable Christopher Jones, to apologize and withdraw his remark as it relates to sugar. Mr. Speaker, I didn't see that sign. I got to put on my glasses. Sir, so in this, to settle that sugar issue, I'm certain with the plans that we are making that sugar will once again be viable. The livestock sector will kick off. New GMC, sir, with $353 million. We are investing in new equipment and cold storage. Drainage and irrigation that is so critical for overall development and to achieve that solid foundation that the president was talking about. $12 billion. We're going to fix the internal canals. We're going to fix the sea defense, the river defense, the sluices, increase pumping capacity, and, sir, importantly, the farm to market roads. The farm to market road, a network of them will be developed so that farmers can have easy access to their farmlands to go and plant and to harvest. And Mr. Speaker, in time to come, under this administration, starting now, Guyana is going to take off. I'm highly confident about that, and as a starting point, Budget 2021 is laying a solid foundation for this country to take off to greater and greater heights. And sir, without any hesitation, I commend this budget to the National Assembly. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member.